This video is supported by Brilliant.org. There's an area in Ohio that some people call the crossroads of America. It's where highways 75 and 70 intersect, and it serves as something of a midpoint between the Midwest and the East Coast, the Great Lakes and Appalachia. And for that reason, it's also the first stop for a huge percentage of drugs that come into the United States. This makes Montgomery County ground zero for the opioid epidemic that's destroying lives all across the United States in record numbers, and the numbers are staggering. In 2017, Montgomery County alone saw over 4,000 overdose cases, resulting in 566 deaths. At its height in May of 2017, the Montgomery County coroner was processing 3 overdose deaths every single day. It made up 70% of their cases that they worked on. Nationwide, overdose deaths are the #1 cause of death for people under 50 years old, more than gun death, more than car crashes, more than AIDS. Last year alone, 72,000 people died of drug overdose in the United States. That's the same as 24 9/11s. And it's still happening. On average, a person dies of a drug overdose in the United States every 7.5 minutes. By the time you finish watching this video, 2 families will have lost loved ones. 2 mothers, fathers, siblings, kids, needlessly slipping away right now. This is the opioid crisis. How did we get to this point? What can we do about it? So first things first, there's a lot of you out there that are going to see what this video is all about, and you're just going to shut down. We tend to do that when we look at addiction. We tend to point to the flaws in that person, tell them they need to get their act together. It's easy to do that. But let's get something straight here. Anyone can get addicted to literally anything. Anything that hits that pleasure receptor in your brain and gives you that hit of dopamine, you can get addicted to it. That's why we can't go 5 minutes without checking our phones. That's why every time we post something on social media, we keep looking back to get those likes and those thumbs up. We obsess over that. It gives us that tiny little hit of dopamine, and we keep coming back for it. That's how people develop weird obsessive compulsive behaviors. It kind of calms and soothes that part of their brain that requires it. People with food issues, same thing. People with kleptomania, self-harm issues, same thing. Look, truth be told, I'm pretty much addicted to pumpkin seeds. It used to be sunflower seeds. Those are the gateway seeds. Literally, if I'm not pounding these things into my mouth while I'm trying to work, I can't focus, I can't sit still, I might as well be going through withdrawal symptoms. I've actually had to have my front teeth bonded twice because I can't stop noshing on these things. So who am I to judge a heroin addict when I can get this hooked on something that doesn't make me feel like God himself is holding me in his arms and telling me that everything's going to be okay and that we're all connected in the universe's love? But heroin does exactly that, thanks to the opioid receptors in our nerves. So let's say your favorite team just lost, so you punch a wall and you break your hand. First of all, get some anger management. It's just a game, calm down. But the second thing that happens is your nerves send pain signals to your brain, and your brain responds by producing endorphins. Endorphins are an endogenous opioid, meaning it's made inside the body. And it helps to sort of manage the pain by hitting the opioid receptors in our nerves like a key in a lock. It basically tells them to chill out with that pain signal. Now, obviously, endorphins are not strong enough to stop the pain signal completely, but they do produce a mild state of euphoria, which is why some people use pain as, for the purpose of sexual arousal. They do this by binding to dopamine inhibitory neurons in our brains. These neurons normally keep the brake on dopamine production, but when these endorphins click into that lock, it causes them to let off the brake and let the dopamine flow. But opioids, like heroin, have a similar chemical structure to those endorphins, so they can slip into that same lock, only they have a much stronger pain-relieving effect. And they release more dopamine, giving you a state of extreme euphoria. And people have been using opioids for this purpose for thousands of years, going all the way back to the ancient Sumerians. Opium dens were popular in the 1800s, and heroin was available to buy over the counter as recently as 1924. In fact, Bayer, the same company that's famous for aspirin, promoted heroin use on children. Now, throughout the 20th century, pharmaceutical companies have worked to synthesize heroin for medicinal use, including oxycodone, which was remarketed and tweaked a little bit in the 90s and rebranded as OxyContin by Purdue Pharmaceuticals. Purdue pushed the hell out of OxyContin, offering bonuses to doctors and clinics who prescribed the drug, and it flowed like candy, making them over $35 billion. But the problem with opioids is, of course, it's very addicting. This is because the brain is constantly trying to rebalance its chemistry, including dopamine. So if you take a substance that floods the brain with dopamine, it has a tendency to keep pulling back and keep pulling back, trying to rebalance itself. This is a phenomenon known as tolerance. And this means you need to take more and more of the drug to get the same effect until you get to the point where you're taking a dangerous level of the drug, and it can actually paralyze your diaphragm. This is how people die from a drug overdose. They just stop breathing and suffocate. Just a helpful reminder, that's probably happening to somebody out there right now. And with OxyContin flooding the market and getting people hooked on synthetic heroin all across the country, it became very obvious that this was a problem and needed to be scaled back. So governments and organizations decided to hold back on the number of OxyContin prescriptions they wrote. But it's not as easy as just taking the pills away. Because your body has now become adjusted to its opioid receptors being filled with synthetic heroin and its nerves being dulled. Now that those receptors are open, the nerves are super sensitive and you just feel pain all over your body. Your brain then produces more chemicals to try to compensate for all of that, and your body's just completely out of whack for a while. This is withdrawal. Now for some people, withdrawal is just a temporary inconvenience that passes like a bad case of the flu. But for other people, for reasons of genetics or environment or any other number of factors, it's a living nightmare. And without access to prescription pills, people turn to the only thing available to end this agony: heroin. Right off the street. Now, it goes without saying that black market heroin is less safe than a controlled prescription pill. But to make matters even worse, a lot of heroin out there today is actually laced with fentanyl, a drug that's 50 times stronger than heroin. Addicts using heroin are still in that cycle of tolerance that makes them have to use more and more of the drug to get the same effect. Using more and more of the drug, of course, gets more expensive, so one way to alleviate that expense is to just use something much stronger, like fentanyl. And this is what's decimating populations in Ohio and all across the country. Fentanyl is so strong that an amount the size of a grain of salt can kill you. Police officers that actually handle this stuff, they have to wear thick gloves and face masks because it can actually seep through your skin, or they can inhale it and kill them. And in case you're wondering why fentanyl is so strong, like why does this even exist in the first place, it's because fentanyl was actually created for terminal cancer patients. It's really more of a palliative care option. But by the time a person is resorted to using fentanyl to get high, they are flirting with death every single day. In fact, some stories say that addicts actually seek out the dealer as somebody who just died from a drug overdose because the perception is that that person must have really strong stuff. Now again, you hear stories like this and you can't help but think that these people are just crazy or suicidal and you just want to write them off. But they're just human beings caught in a trap, often a trap not of their own making. And often a trap that's exacerbated by a lack of social support that's made even worse by the way we handle the war on drugs by treating drug users as criminals, which is something that I've talked about in a previous video. And this can happen to anybody. If it hasn't happened to somebody that you personally know, it's definitely happened to somebody that you've heard of. Philip Seymour Hoffman, Prince, Tom Petty, Heath Ledger, just to name a few. Now, if there's any good news here, it's that the drug cartels have actually scaled back the use of fentanyl in their heroin because it turns out it's actually killing so many of their customers that they're starting to lose money. Capitalism. So in an attempt to combat this crisis, communities have turned to all kinds of different options, some more effective than others. A key weapon in the fight against overdose is naloxone. When injected or inhaled, it can actually reverse the effects of those opioids by kicking them out of the opioid receptors in our nerves, saving somebody that's on the brink of death. Naloxone really is kind of a miracle drug. It saved over 16,000 lives in New Jersey alone. 16,000 lives in a single state. Just imagine what their overdose rates would have been if it wasn't for that. In fact, back in July, naloxone saved the life of Demi Lovato. If you know anybody who might be at risk, having a personal supply of naloxone can literally be the difference between life and death. It goes by the brand name Narcan, and it's actually available from CVS, Walmart, and Walgreens in 45 states, over the counter. You can just go buy it. But if you need a subscription, go talk to a doctor. They want to keep you alive, and they won't report you to authorities. And by the way, if you see an overdose and you don't have naloxone on hand, immediately call 911. Most states have Good Samaritan laws that protect you from any kind of prosecution. More information on all this down below. But as amazing as naloxone is, it is still not any kind of a treatment for opioid addiction. The most effective treatments can be broken down by abstinence programs like Narcotics Anonymous or maintenance programs that use opioid substitutes. Unfortunately, studies have shown that abstinence programs have mixed results at best, though they can be good to provide a social structure if somebody needs that. So maintenance programs with opioid substitutes have become a promising option. One of the more promising and popular substitutes is a substance called kratom. Kratom, or kratom, I've heard it said both ways, is a tree from Southeast Asia, and people for thousands of years have chewed their leaves for its stimulant effect, much like poppy seeds or the coca leaves from the coca plant. Native users report that it gives them a stimulant effect, kind of helps them to do their work a little bit better, but when consumed in higher doses, it can actually simulate the effects of opioids. This is because the major active compounds in kratom, metrogenine and 7-hydroxymetrogenine, work on opioid receptors in our nerves, which technically makes it an opioid. The difference is it lacks a secondary mechanism that can depress breathing and cause people to overdose, so it's a lot less deadly. Now don't get me wrong, kratom is addictive, and there have been some deaths associated with it, but it is only in the double digits as opposed to, the opioids in the 5 digits. The question is, does kratom addiction lead to taking more dangerous amounts of kratom or lead them to taking more dangerous types of substances? Scientific consensus on this does not exist. We don't know right now, which is why the FDA and the DEA have tried to get people to not use kratom. Kratom dependence is probably a lesser evil than dependence on synthetic opioids, but it is not a replacement for a detox program with professional counseling. In lieu of extensive medical research, most of what we know about kratom is based off of anecdotal evidence. For some people, it's been an absolute lifesaver. For others, it was a temporary flirtation before they relapsed back into the harder stuff. So, kratom is hardly a silver bullet. Those who had success with kratom likely had other factors that contributed to their success, things like the social structure that we always talk about, family and friends and interests that they could dive into. If you have those ingredients, kratom might be a good part of your recovery. If you don't, might help, might not. Kratom is, of course, not the only traditional substance. It's been touted as a treatment for addiction. Treatments like ayahuasca and iboga both have shown a whole lot of promise, but those are illegal in the United States, whereas kratom is not illegal. With the opioid epidemic taking lives on a minute-by-minute basis, all of these substances and all of these treatments need to be studied extensively so that we can push those out to people who need it. Because for right now, all we've got is anecdotal evidence, and that leaves a lot to be desired. Because the elephant in the room when it comes to addiction is that addicts aren't exactly the most reliable source of information. And of course, conspiracy theories abound about some shadowy groups that are trying to keep an effective treatment away from middle-class Americans so pharmaceutical companies can rake in millions. It's important to remember when you're talking about anecdotal evidence that personal stories have a specifically strong pull on our imagination. It can sound a lot like capital T truth, even if it flies against the face of all of scientific consensus. Look, I get it. When you're sinking into quicksand, you want to grab onto a lifeline, and the deeper you go, the more any lifeline will do. But it's important the further you go into this cycle that you find the right lifeline. And of course, the deeper you go down, the harder it is to suss that out. This is why it's important to seek out a professional and medically supervised treatment program. You can always try kratom or any other alternative substance on top of that, but you have to start by putting yourself in the hands of professionals. Look, I could probably get a lot more views if I came on here and did some kind of sensationalized conspiracy theory or tout some miracle cure that you can find in your backyard. But I'm not Dr. Oz. This problem is too big and the stakes are too high. Too much human potential is being lost every single day. If you know someone that's struggling with addiction, buy them some Narcan and take them out to dinner. I know it can be heartbreaking, it can be frustrating, but it might be the best thing you can do to save their life. And if you're struggling with addiction, check in the links below to find a treatment service location near you or call their helpline at 1-800-662-HELP. Now, this is the part of the video where I normally have an incredibly clever segue into the sponsor message, but I'm not even going to try today. Today's video is brought to you by Brilliant.org. I thought about doing something about being addicted to knowledge, but it's not appropriate. Brilliant.org is an online learning platform that teaches you how to think like a scientist. Instead of just throwing, facts and figures at you, they help you work through the process so you can figure it out on your own, helps you to learn a little bit better, and it superpowers your knowledge base as you move forward and apply that to other things in your life. A good place to start on Brilliant is their Science Essentials course, and it's a good idea to start there because these problems get complicated real quick. If you need to bone up on your math skills, there's a Math Fundamentals course that can kind of get you up to speed, and next thing you know, you'll be crunching numbers in ways that you never thought possible. If you'd like to try Brilliant for free, you can sign up at brilliant.org/answerswithjoe and get free access to their weekly brain teasers and puzzles. And if you would like to sign up for their premium subscription that gives you access to all their courses, the first 200 people can get 20% off your subscription for life. Brilliant has been an awesome supporter of this channel and has played a huge part in its growth. So if you're a fan of this channel, show them some love and get a little bit smarter in the process. Brilliant.org/answerswithjoe, links down in the description. Thanks again to Brilliant for supporting this video, and a huge shout out to the Answer Files on Patreon who are supporting this channel and just building a really awesome community, doing some really cool stuff. We got some cool new people that have joined. I gotta murder their names real quick. We got Governor Maddock, Jim Urin, Wilfred L. Dominguez, Marek Belsky, Elin Capone, Pierre Ponk, Lori Collier, Justin, Gage Buck, Know the Fundamentals, and Alex Ray. Thank you guys so much. If you'd like to join them, get access to early videos and extra stuff that other people don't get to see, you can go to patreon.com/answerswithjoe. Please like and share this video if you liked it, and please do share it with people who might have an interest in this subject or might have issues with this subject. It's a very important thing. And if this is your first time here, maybe check out this video. Google thinks you'll like that one, and if you do, you can watch some others. Maybe subscribe, because I come back with videos just like this every Monday. All right, thanks again for watching. You guys go out, have an eye-opening week, and I'll see you on Monday. Love you guys. Take care.